Welcome back to another episode of the Volt Variety Show. I'm Volt, and today I'm joined by my lovely oldest daughter, Camden, where we're going to discuss key questions and life events that are and have been impacting many high school seniors across the country. This is an open discussion. We've only generally talked about the topics beforehand, so we'll definitely see how this goes. I'm excited to do this. So welcome, Cam. Excited to have you on.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Well, we're going to start off with hopefully what's a very easy question. I noticed that you're wearing the sunshine sweatshirt. You were not wearing that earlier today, and I think you specifically changed that for this discussion. So Cam, why did you go to the sunshine sweatshirt?
Well, the sunshine is something that is very significant to me. I was gifted this sweatshirt as well as a lot of other sunshine merchandise because it has been a bit of a special thing between Lauren and I, Lauren, my stepmom. It's just something she calls me and like a symbol of affection between us, and it's really important and special to me.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I'm sure she'll be very glad to hear that. So, lots of things are happening for seniors across the country. Honestly, probably for a lot of seniors, their things started for them last summer, right? Because they had to start making some big decisions in their lives about where they're going to go to school, how they're going to pick their schools, everything like that. And so, last summer we went on a pretty substantial. We called it a vacation. I don't know that your younger sister would say it was quite a vacation for her, but an important one. So let's talk a little bit about kind of what some of the things that kind of led up to that. A big one that pretty much all seniors have to go through with is testing, right? They had to take SATs and that kind of process. So why don't we talk a little bit about how you approach SATs, the about bazillion times that you took the SATs, what your thinking was there, maybe any stressors.
Well, for me, the SAT, obviously, the first thing to think about when going into it is that the score you get now, whether the score is good, bad, somewhere in the middle, it only matters if you add it to your application because more and more we're seeing colleges not require you to provide that sort of information because, as we've seen, like with generalized standardized testing, some of those scores just aren't reflective of what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went into it, my very first SAT was I took it with the school. I did it SAT day, my district, our school-wide SAT. I took that test. I mean, I did fairly well. I was happy with my score, but what I had heard was that when you take these additional SATs outside of like your whole school one, that sometimes the scores vary because something that people don't know is when you take it at an additional testing location, the scores are curved. So when you're taking them at these locations, usually there's a lot less kids. And so if one kid does poorly, if it's a makeup, things like that, anything can impact your score.
Hmm. Okay. Well, that's certainly interesting. Though. So you took it lots of times.
Yes.
So why was that? You subjected yourself to a lot of punishment through that process, and why did you decide to take it so many times?
Well, just because, if unless you're at that 1600 mark, which obviously, nobody's really getting there, it's important to try to get your best score. You want your application to be the best it can, and if you can retake it time and time again, especially with they hand out so many free waivers now that it's just a wasted opportunity if you're not going to take these tests. And you know what? If you're happy with your score the first time, that's great. But something that I wanted to do was just to push myself that extra mile just to see where I could get.
Sure. So I remember too at some point there's something about because the two parts of the test, if you do better on a part later on or something like that, it's a cumulative score or
Oh,
something.
yes. So something that you can do that's very unique with the SAT is that you can super score. So that means that if your math or language portion is better on two different tests, that you can use those scores from each test. So if I got a 600, fake numbers of course, if I got a 600 on my first math SAT and I got a 600 on my language, but then on the next test I took, I got a 700 on my language. I could use that higher score even though it was from a different test.
Okay, yeah, that's all good. Certainly people should look to take advantage of that where they can. So, Obviously you did well enough in your SATs to kind of, open up different schools to you. And so, we had some discussions about going out and visiting those schools so you could get a better feel for what maybe worked, what we didn't. Talk a little bit about, the schools that we went to, why we particularly chose those schools. That could be certainly insightful, maybe some things you were thinking about for those,
So, first of all, we started in state because that's somewhere, am I allowed to drop a school name?
if you want to.
Um, we started here at the big house, UMich, and that was just somewhere, obviously, it's in our backyard. I wanted to go see it, wanted to hear about all the glory that we've, been hearing about for years. I wanted to see it in person. And so from there, it's just important to look at things that you think matter to you. Obviously, when we were going through this process, what we did was we made a scale. We put the things that were the most important to me at the top: distance from home, what their curriculum looked like, because, something that I was interested in was having an open curriculum. And that's why one of my top schools that we went to go see was Brown, because something that interested me was that open curriculum. I really wanted to be able to, choose the courses I was taking and the classes that I was going to participate in. And then from there, I kind of, looked at some of those other things that I cared about. For me, this trip was obviously quite far from home, and it was an experience for sure, but sometimes you just have to go take those risks, and you really never know unless you go see it. So we went and saw Columbia, Dartmouth, NYU. I don't even remember all the schools we saw.
Boston U.
Brown, Boston University. And all of those places were just, they had things that stood out to me. And until you go see them, you never know. And even though at the end of the day, UMich was the place I wanted to be, seeing those places helped me rule them out, helped me, see things that I liked and didn't like, and really helped me be sure in my decision to go somewhere.
Well, I think one of the things I know we had talked about, and I think we probably got educated about it quite a bit at Boston University, right, where they really honed in talking about the whole early action, early decision. So how did that kind of impact your thinking?
Well, a lot of schools, actually, I think every single school we went and saw was what is called an early decision school, which means that when you apply there, you're basically saying that you are my number one choice. It tells the college that that's where you want to go, ideally. And so that can get you some priority in your acceptance, but once you get accepted, you have to go there. And so for me, that was just a little bit too much commitment, and so that means that my choices were general, like general admission, general decision, comes out springtime of your senior year, or I could apply at schools that have what's called early action, which just means you get your application in early, it's reviewed earlier, you get your decision earlier, and it's just nice to know that you have those options going into the springtime when it's, time to commit and
Sure,
choose a
sure.
college. And so, especially for me, that was just something that made me too nervous. I didn't want to have to make that decision before I had even weighed all of my options. And
Okay.
so I ended up, applying early action for University of Michigan, and the rest, anywhere else I applied, I did general.
Okay, good. Well, I think, just kind of thinking back, looking back at it, listen, not everybody, and we're not encouraging that everybody's got to go and hit some of the schools that Cam had mentioned here, but certainly schools that you might be interested in, even maybe some schools that you're not necessarily interested in, going and seeing them and signing up for their tours and getting, most all of them had a student perspective on what was happening, I think was very helpful, even as a parent, right? Hearing what the schools were about and how they approach things, I think was very helpful, right? Overall scope of things. Kind of looking at it, and then then we continued. We obviously also went to Northwestern here,
Oh yeah.
which was very 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 beautiful campus to go through, and I think that gave you some struggles, right?
Yes.
What to do.
That was my toughest choice I had to make there. And, the thing for me, the real deciding factor was the proximity to my home. And throughout all of my rankings, we made a point system and everything. And it just, being close to home was something that gave me a sense of security I didn't feel at any of the other schools. And while the campus was pretty and the programs may have been a better fit for me, I just, I prioritized being close to home because I knew that's what was going to give me the best experience.
Yeah, very good. So we get through last summer. You're obviously getting ready to start your kind of your senior year, trying to step back, look at that. Where was your head? Where was your head before the day before the few weeks before you started going into your senior year? What were you thinking about?
Well, to be honest, it wasn't college. I was really more worried about, making the best of my senior year, really keeping my grades up. I had a lot of anxiety about how, junior year is rough, and especially for me, it hit kind of hard, and I just wanted to, get the momentum I had from that experience over the summer, all of the excitement, and I really wanted that to fuel me to get through this year because it's the last one. And, senior year, it feels like you're over that hump, but sometimes it's still just, you're intimidated. You're not ready to move on, and I think that sometimes senioritis, it's a real thing. It gets to you.
Yeah, yeah. I think so far this year, you certainly have still had some ups and downs. And I don't think that's necessarily unique to you. But do you want to talk about any of that? Like any, kind of this roller coaster you've been on a little bit.
Well, for me, I've always been an academically driven person, and I think that in some ways it gives me a sense of consistency, but it also, contributes negatively sometimes. You have a lot of stress being in all of the AP classes, being so competitive with your peers. It sometimes feels like you can't make friends because that's your competition. Those are the people that colleges are looking at over you. For me specifically, I kind of reclused a little during junior year because it was starting to get to me. I wasn't going out very often. I was having a hard time. It was just I was struggling, and I got some help, and I tried to work through that, but obviously some of those things they tend to stick around. And so I'm working on how to deal with that in my day-to-day life, but also stay on top of this last school year here and just get through and move on to this next phase that will give me new opportunities.
Yeah, you mentioned something that kind of made me think of a data point that happened. At some point you got to this part where you were applying to schools, and we went out and saw University of Michigan a second time, and to get another feel, another feel for that. And then I remember at some point, I don't remember one of your friends, but you'd mentioned that you were going to apply there, and so then they added it to their list or something that maybe they
Yes.
weren't before, and so all of a sudden you kind of got in this mode like, great, I just gave somebody an encouragement to now apply to a school. That's just one more person that's in the pot, right? That you now have to arguably compete against. So when you got time to kind of apply for schools, how many schools did you end up applying to?
Well, for me, I submitted my applications to three schools. I, it once kind of went and saw all of the other schools, I think that sometimes people take their list of schools they're applying to and make it so long, and it's so much additional work because they want to have all of those options. But I think that a lot of the times these are the people that haven't gone and seen these schools because I think when you really see yourself somewhere, it's the only place you want to be. And I think that while it's good to have options, for me, I went and saw all of these Ivy League schools because I was in the competitive caliber to be there. But at the end of the day, that's not what mattered to me. And I think that, I obviously you apply to some safety schools because you want to have the most options for yourself. But if there's a place you really want to be, just go for it. You got a gun for it. You got to put your best foot forward and really try to get there.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. Certainly as part of that. So I can remember leading up to it was getting closer and closer and closer to find out if you had gotten selected. So how were you feeling getting up to that day? You knew it was coming, you knew it was coming, you knew it was coming, and then at some point you guys had enough intel that you knew the day that it was coming.
We knew the time.
Yeah, and so walk people through that process. How were you feeling kind of leading up to that?
Well, obviously very anxious, very nervous. But I was also just so excited because, when you submit your application, you obviously, you feel nervous about it and you always think like, what could I have done different or how could I have been better about it? What could I have said differently? But for me, I really, I felt like I belonged there. And I thought from the very time I submitted that application that this was the school for me. And as naive as it was, I just when I opened that letter, I was like, there's no way I'm not going to get in because this is the place I have to go. And, obviously when I opened that letter, I immediately gave you a call because it's just such a relief, knowing that you're going to be exactly where you want to for the next 4 or so years of your life.
Yeah, no, it was a big deal. Obviously excited for all of us. For all parents out there as guidance, right? We were hesitant to go and buy anything ahead of time that was UMIS related. Lauren did not want to do that because she didn't want to jinx anything. So we held off to the last possible moment, and so we don't do that. So certainly we were all very very excited. So. Um, so it sounded like the reason why you picked UMIS, you felt like that was the right school for you. And you had to do essays, right, as part of that. So were there anything specific or any topics you think that helped you on those essays, or that those were about that you thought were helpful to you?
Well, specifically for Michigan, you have to write 3 essays. You have to write a personal essay, which you're going to need for most schools that you apply to, and then they do a Why Us essay, which is also typical to most schools. But something that's unique to Michigan is they require you write a communities essay about a place you felt like you belonged or somewhere you have contributed positively towards. And something that I think was unique about my application, being that I am, a middle class you know, white girl. And, you know, that's something that obviously you just have to acknowledge because nowadays, you want the diversity and you want to have a demographic. You want to be all over the board. You want to have those things as a college. And it's one of the things you admire in a place when you see that type of diversity. So for me, something that I decided to share about myself to Michigan was that I am a part of the LGBTQIA community, and I think that that was something that really kind of gave me a bit of depth that you couldn't see looking at me from the surface because that's not something that you would assume about me or something that you would know from reading my other essays. And I also wrote about in my personal essay about how my mental health struggles have impacted me as a person because that's unique to me and you need to the the key with these essays is to give them insight into who you are as a person outside of the academics, outside of the numbers. They want to hear what you're passionate about. They want to see what you've done and see who you are.
Yeah,
Things that
I think they want to connect, right? The reviewer and reading other things, they're going to read a lot of the same stuff from a lot of the same people, right? So the way that makes all of us unique, right, is our individuality and our individual experiences. So finding ways of tapping into those, like you did, I think really helped distinguish you from maybe other people, right, that didn't do that or followed maybe a more boilerplate, kind of way of approaching those, those things for sure. Um, so you're coming to the end of your senior year. It's coming fast, right? How are you feeling about that?
a little bittersweet because as I personally, uh, some of us are high school people. Some of us peak, have a great time, a grand involvement, make all great friends, prom queen, all that sort of thing. But for me, I guess, being academically driven and being in that sort of, environment, just it wasn't the best for me. And so I'm grateful to move on to the next chapter of my life, but I also find security there. I know the hallways, I know my daily routine. I know that I'm not going to encounter anything that's too troublesome to me anymore because I've gotten into the groove of things. And something that I think is also interesting is you go from being the top of the school where you're the big dog, nobody's going to pick a fight with you, to being basically a nobody. You have to start with new footing at a new place.
Sure.
And, being a freshman at a new school, a bigger school with people that are equally as talented and as unique as you are, where in a high school, it's a little bit easier to be at
Yeah,
the
the
top
pool's
of the
smaller.
crowd.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a much smaller pool for sure. Yeah, no doubt about that. Um, All right. Well, let's talk about another thing that I know probably lots of people up to this point have already had jobs, but that's not been true for you. You've had the luxury of not really going needing to go out and have that, but you've kind of found the need to say, hey, I want to get out in that space, and so you started down this first job path. So talking about your first job, what did you want to do? What was your goal? If you could have said, hey, my first thing I want to go and do that, what did you want to be able to do?
Well, ideally, I wanted to be a barista, but the problem with that is that, well, number one, being a barista is usually not the lowest tier of job at a place. And so being, a teenager, and even though I am an adult, I'm still a teenager, especially being one in high school. It's harder to get those, more higher tier jobs, even if it isn't something that's like career wise or anything like that. The applications are usually harder because you usually, have to know more than doing something like basic, food management, retail task. And that's something that I took a step back with because obviously, with college coming up and everything, I wanted to just have something easy, accessible, something I didn't have to think about. I can go to work, do my, easy job, not use too many brain cells doing
Sure,
it, and
sure.
do honest, good work and not have to put, all of this effort into trying to do something that's not, the lowest tier at a place.
Sure, sure. So you did apply, or you try to apply, or something like that, to a couple of different things, but ultimately, you did get a new job. Why there? Why did you pick that? How did that come across your radar?
Well, it's close.
Sure.
Obviously, the commute short, working at am I allowed to drop? I'm not going to name drop, but I'll say, working at a mall. I feel like it's a rite of passage for a teenager. You
Okay.
gotta work in the mall. You can, go to the pretzel kiosk on your break. It's important to me, man. I'm always thinking about the food. It was easy for me. The application process was fairly easy. I had already made a resume through one of my classes in high school, and I just had to upload it, answer a few questions, and also they only hire 18 and up, and so that's something that I think was kind of interesting because that means that, the rest of the people you're working with aren't going to be not necessarily immature, but obviously you're working with people that care a little bit more if
Sure.
you're an adult.
Yeah. Okay. So so you get the response back and say, hey, we want an interview. How do you feel about that?
Nervous, as much as I'm doing here now, I'm not much of a chatterer in a one-on-one setting. Kind of stresses me out a little.
Nobody would know that.
But luckily for me, it was not an in-person interview. I did it over the phone, and so that, it's always easy to kind of switch on that professional personality when you're not sitting there and they can't, look you dead in the eyes and see the sweat rolling down your neck. So it went really well, actually. The lady told me that she thought I was going to be wonderful for the position, whether she tells that to everybody or not. She seemed really enthused about it, and
Well,
I
she
was
didn't tell you the
glad to hear it.
opposite,
Yeah,
so I guess there's
this is
that.
true.
Sure.
She did offer me the job, so it was nice. It was good for me. It was a happy medium where I got that professional experience doing an interview like that, but it wasn't so far that I was like,
Sure.
nervous about it.
Sure. Okay. So you've now got you start later this week. How are you feeling about that first day?
Obviously I'm a little nervous, but honestly, I think it's going to be good for me because it's a whole new set of people that I'm going to be introduced to, a whole new environment. And obviously, it never hurts to make a little cabbage, especially going into college. It's something that you kind of just have to be realistic with.
Sure. Sure. Okay. Well, something else that's been true and been said a lot about your generation, probably two things that come up routinely, and probably almost every parent that would ever listen to this would probably relate to this, right? Is the whole one, your generation, particularly getting a rap around being entitled and not being willing to work hard. Certainly, social media is just dominates your generation. You're across the board on the phone all the time, chatting, Instagramming, face snapping, whatever they're all called. So let's talk a little bit about that, right? So, I think most people have a very negative opinion, at least older people, I think, do in a lot of cases about social media, right? You're close to it. You're into it a lot more. Do you, where you sit, do you see any pros, any positives to social media?
I think that the institution of social media as a whole was intended with a positive purpose. Obviously, you get that type of connection between people that you don't necessarily have like through like day to day. And I think that that could be important, but I also think that it's warped because now, these the interactions that we have are so shallow because it's been made to a point where it's instant. You're not really putting in the effort to speak to these people anymore. You're throwing them a like on social media with the tap of a button instead of providing them what is the equivalent in real life, a compliment, something that can be so personal. And I also think that there's obviously a lot of negative influence on social media, especially on girls and, the way people portray themselves with editing and things like that. It can, really warp your view of how things are in real life. But I also, hand in hand with that, I think it's inspirational sometimes. I think if you're using it for the right intent and you're using the right platforms, you can get things, style, like home decor, like things like that, where it's like you can see something and replicate it in your own way without it having to do with things that are negatively contributing, like body image or, like it's not about the like counts when you're using a recipe off the internet. It's not about how many likes the recipe has. It's about whether or not you want to make it. It's about how you feel about it. And I think that you just have to be able to distinguish between the two when it's good media or when it's just media.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, you know, how many times do you hear us say to you, you'll say, "Oh, I want X." Pick whatever the X is. I want this widget, I want this piece of clothing or whatever, and what's one of our very first responses to you?
Did you see that on TikTok?
Did you see that on TikTok? And certainly it's true sometimes that you did see it on TikTok or not. And so, and I think that's part of the problem, right? Is that there's the influencers that, and not all influencers. I'm not meaning in that way, but a lot of the influencers, they have a certain look about them or a certain appeal about them that has been catered to appeal to the people that are looking for those particular things, and so they may not necessarily be reflective of the real population, to reality in some cases. Lauren, right? She's my wife's very beautiful, I think, and so and I think most people would probably agree with me, but we have to tell her, I'm like, okay, there's only so many pictures we can take on something, it's okay, we don't have to be perfect, but unfortunately, she's also learned that people seek perfection in these images and these certain things, etc. And so it's this balancing act between showing reality and nobody wanting to see reality because they live that every day, or showing them something that's not reality and that they thinkingly that they want to strive for. So it's a complicated mix, and your generation has gotten the brunt of that, certainly across that view. So I mentioned earlier about this whole your generation feeling entitled and not working hard. I could see some people rolling their eyes earlier at the other end of the screen when I said, "Oh, you just now are getting your first job at 18." And how do you take that criticism? How do you take when people talk about that? Because I'm not the first person that's ever said that and talked about your particular generation. What's your response to that, or what's your thoughts on it?
Well, I think it's important to note that, we're progressing in a different way because obviously, with the access to media, things like that, there's many different ways to do things where I feel like in the past, you didn't have that type of versatility. And I think that it's also important to note that things have gotten harder for people in ways that, might be understated or overlooked. I think that while I may be 18 getting my first job, but obviously the reason that I was unemployed until now was because I had to dedicate 100% of my time towards my education. I had to take those steps and make those sacrifices to kind of get there, to get to the top of the pack, because there's just so much competition. There's so many people competing for these spots now. And while to some people it may look like I'm lazy or I don't put effort in. You're just not seeing the effort that is put in. But on the other hand, there are people obviously that aren't putting in any effort. People that are unemployed, bottom of the pack at school, just aren't doing anything. And I think it's really easy to be unmotivated because if you don't have that motivation coming from inside of yourself, I think that you're not going to get it. You're not going to move. You're not going to go anywhere. You're kind of
Certainly.
at a standstill.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I think some people out there that probably listen to this would think that, well, I worked really hard. I was at the top of my pack and I had a job. And so, in the question back, and I'm not saying it is, but it feels like, from my perspective, that things in your generation in a number of fronts have gotten easier. Or, I'm sorry, have gotten harder on a lot of fronts. And then, but some aspects may be a little bit easier. But I think there's a number of things there. I think with social media and the impact and things like cyberbullying, just even with all of the shootings and things of that nature that were just not, that we didn't have to deal with before, right? Certainly were, or so rare. It's just been a very, very different time. So you mentioned it, and you talked a little bit earlier about the whole idea of being adult now, right? So you hit 18 and you get to be an adult and start making some adult decisions. What changed? You hit 18. What changed for you in general terms?
Well, I mean, I bought a lotto ticket.
Okay, certainly.
I guess for me, still being in high school, I feel like I haven't had the full experience of being an adult yet because I
That makes
still,
sense.
have had that buffer of being living at home. I still have my same daily schedule. I woke up on that Tuesday, last day I was 17, and the next Wednesday I did the same exact thing, but the number changed. And so I think for me, I guess it was more of just like my mindset changed from I have this safety net to now I don't, because now all of my decisions, they're reflective of me in my adulthood. I mean, something that was very nerve-wracking for me, I had an eye appointment. I showed up and the lady was like, "Where's your insurance?" I wanted my mommy. I gotta say, I wanted Lauren to be in that room with me so bad. I have a doctor's appointment coming up. Cannot describe to you the amount of anxiety I have walking into that because, they told me they're not coming with me, and I don't think that's quite fair yet.
Okay.
Um, but there's also some responsibility that comes with it. I think that, not more is expected of me because I feel like you guys have always had some high standards, for what I can do and how I can apply myself in these situations. But I think that, it also comes with there's more disappointment in myself in things that I've done wrong as an adult because it's like, now is my time to really show who I am, who I've become, who I was raised to be. I think it's really reflective of what I've put into myself and how other people have impacted me. And obviously, 18 started off rough and bumpy for me. I made some mistakes. There were some things that I regret doing, and I think that also I've seen the most growth within myself in these past few months. I see myself making good decisions because they're good for me instead of just because I know it's what I should be doing. I care about things that didn't matter to me before. I started going to the gym because I'm like healthy now or whatever. It's just something that, shifted for me. It's
Okay.
I have to take care of me. I'm need to be my biggest priority because if I'm not going to be anybody else's anymore. I'm not a kid.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely some truth to that. And I think that, we kind of turn things to you in a way that basically, okay, you've now got to start making some of these decisions. We can't make them for you, right? You're an adult. You get to have, make control and decisions about things that are happening for your life. Now we can have rules still, right? Because you're in our house, but it changes a little bit. So I know you're still relatively new to it, and with school, I think it's some of that. Do you have a favorite part of being an adult at this point that you're like, oh, I like that I can do that?
If my friends need to buy anything that you have to be 18 to buy, spray paint for a school project, a lotto ticket, I can be like, I'll come, guys. I got it. I got the ID. My shiny new ID came in the mail. It only says under 21 till now. I've got that little ID. I've taken many trips to the Home Depot to get some spray paint for some school projects this year. You know, I can't remember anything else that we've went and did, but all sorts of goofy things. I also, I enjoy that. I feel like almost in a way your perspective of me changed when I became an adult. You swear around me now. I can hear the bad
I
words.
don't swear. Never swear. Doesn't happen.
I feel like as an adult in a family, it's just different. You don't I didn't feel like I don't feel like I'm playing anymore. I feel like I'm hanging around my family. I feel like I come downstairs and I'm almost not equal, but closer to being equal with you guys. I feel like I'm at a level where, we see eye to eye, not just because we're the same height.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever. Do you have a least favorite part other than going to the doctor, or is that it? What's the parts about this that you just do not like?
I guess I think I'm harder on myself now that I'm an adult because every decision I make, it's just like you knew better. Anything that I've done that was wrong, it's just like that was something that you'd have done as a kid. I feel like almost in a way because I put this sort of academic pressure on myself. I didn't have time to make mistakes. I didn't make mistakes. I wasn't a reckless kid that made stupid decisions and learned a lot of lessons, and so I sort of had to do that when I came into adulthood. And obviously, I did some dumb things and I made some mistakes, but it's also something that you know, I took that hard myself because even though maybe you were disappointed in me or people were mad at me, I was the most mad at myself because it's like I've been given this chance to be a fresh start. I've been given the opportunity to be a different person, be better than I was before when I was a kid, have a new name for myself. And I think that at the beginning I messed it up a little, and that's something that I feel like I've been working to fix ever since, and something that I'm still working on because it's important to me that like when people view me as an adult, they view me as a respectable one, as not just a kid with the 18 label, as an adult person, and
Sure.
it's important to me.
Oh, that's really good. Well, I think on that note, we'll work on wrapping this up. So, Cam, definitely thank you very much. Appreciate it. Since obviously for a number of the people might be watching this is all new to us. We're learning as we go here, and we're going to be adding additional content on different topics and things we go through. But I certainly like to bring in the family and have them part of the discussions and kind of expose people to things that maybe we've learned or that are happening at the that particular level. So Cam, thank you very much. Appreciate it. For those of you that are out there, if you like the content today, please click the like or subscribe at the bottom. And with that said, we will be signing off, and we will talk to you all very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.